You can stop the recording.
I'll just, if I have to leave, I'll just leave it running and done. I also don't think it will stop the recording if I leave. I think it only stops when the last person leaves. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. So, welcome everyone. We have a priority override in the thing for Prometheus 3.0 for KubeCon, go or no go. I don't know who put this in. I presume Gautham, but I don't know.
Well, it's Jesus, because he's now leading the Prometheus 3.0 efforts, or the Prometheus Hotel efforts. We need to make a decision. And we also have people from the Prometheus. One second. This is both related. We also have the people from the working group here, but I think the general consensus is leaning towards PromCon rather than KubeCon.
Yeah, the main reason has been that the big projects to include in the release are in the works, and maybe they won't be ready for April.
Could it be KubeCon NA instead of PromCon? If I remember correctly, the main reason for 3.0 was marketing, and PromCon is not as big as KubeCon, I think.
Do we know the dates of KubeCon NA? That's November 6 and 9, so the same month. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to this either.
We can do like a release candidate at PromCon and the actual release at KubeCon or something like that.
Sounds good.
Just for, it's November 12th and 15th, the 2024. The other one was for 2023. November 12th to 15 is Salt Lake City in Utah this year.
You are right. Google still has the old link catched up. It's on the top of the list.
I'd also generally prefer KubeCon. Also, I don't think any planning has started for PromCon yet, and it needs to start-ish around this date if we want to have it this year with nice timelines. The one external dependency which we have is, Gautham, did you ever talk to people about potentially getting keynote slot? Yes, no? Because if we got the keynote slot, we need to juggle this either way. Okay.
No, I didn't get around to that. They were on vacation or I was on vacation and it just got dropped.
Okay, then we don't have an external dependency. I mean, if Jesus is the person who has the most overview over the whole thing and is not confident for March, easy decision.
Yes, I am also on PTO for the next 3 weeks. So March for me will be like, it's March. Yeah. Okay. So and like for KubeCon, could we have like if we have this release, can we talk with KubeCon to like have a spot to talk about this? Maybe this is what you discussed with Gohan earlier.
So a spot is going to be easy because we have the project update and we can just use it for the project update. We can also submit a talk and maybe talk to the chairs about wanting to have this as a distinct thing. I'd honestly prefer if we had if we had a keynote slot, it would be on Gotham, I think, to have this conversation.
Okay.
Will do.
I didn't hear you.
I said I will do that. Yeah, I'm pinging them right now.
Okay, good. Okay, consensus. Let's defer to KubeCon/PromCon 2024. Let's okay, consensus. Let's move.
Go for it, Brian.
I just want to note that we have we put Prometheus 3 in the description of the PromCon EU maintainer session. I guess we can give a progress update and we can promise it in November.
Sounds good. KubeCon.
Do we want to be explicit in the consensus? KubeCon or PromCon? KubeCon over PromCon?
Is anyone for PromCon?
I would like to leave the option open.
Okay. So consensus, we will move the release date or target. Sorry. We'll move the release target of Prometheus 3.0 to KubeCon NA or PromCon 2024.
KubeCon 2024 NA.
Yeah, okay.
NA stands for not applicable.
If we're being pedantic, I think it's KubeCon NA 2024. And by think, I mean I'm certain. No, but let's not dwell on this endlessly. So, anyone disagreeing? Okay. And done. Hey, Carrie, we just talked about Prometheus 3.0 and moved it to KubeCon or PromCon.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. Björn, group level labels for rules.
I think I just, now it has disappeared. It's down there. Let me remember. I think this is just because we discovered a pull request during bug script that was there for a while, and we didn't feel qualified to make a call. So let's just all have a look at this pull request and decide what to do. So Brian did a code review already. I wrote during the bug scrub. There are so many topics. I mean, we're sorry for the so we promised to bring this up at the Dev Summit in summer, and half a year later it wasn't discussed. So we have now upvoted the topic. So yeah, in the bug scrub we all collectively decided to upvote the topic, and now we are here. Brian, you might have the best context on this one as you looked at the code. So maybe you could explain, yeah, the nuance here, what we have to decide.
Yeah, I don't actually remember, but I'm reading it again now. So it's in the context of recording rules. Oh yeah. So you write a bunch of recording rules, right? And then, so each one has the labels that come out of whatever query, sum by customer or something like that. So it has a customer label. So what this PR is doing is it's saying, I want to put an extra label or set of labels on all of those outputs. So you put a label on it that says from rule true or something like that, or whatever makes sense to you. That's what it's doing. It's a statically defined set of labels per group that is appended to the output of the labels that came out of a query.
So today, do we allow setting these labels on a per rule level, and this also now adds the group level, or is it not even, we cannot even set custom labels on a rule?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can certainly do it in alerts.
Oh, I think it's for adding the same set of labels to all the alerts or all the rules inside the group. So you don't have to repeat them.
So you can do it right now, but I think that's true. So line 114 in the PR in recording rules.md says you can do it per rule right now.
I like it. I think I'm kind of surprised that this doesn't already exist.
What is the use case? Why would someone would do that?
I can think of one use case. Like you can have like one file per tenant or customer that you have, and they can put all their rules, recording rules, alerts in that file. And then you can have a global rule that says customer name is A, customer name is B. Today you have to do it for every rule. Now you can kind of do it at the rule group level.
But it would be nice if they gave us the use case.
Yeah. The only other question I have is ordering. I assume that group would come first, and then a label and a rule would override that.
Yeah, so concerns are mostly Julian's comments, right? Maybe we should take them serious because Julian's not here right now. Essentially, if you go almost to the end, there are two longer comments by Julian. I understand the potential convenience of adding labels to groups of rules, but I still have concerns about blindly applying labels to all rules in a group. In many cases, individual rules may not require the added label, and it could lead to unnecessary complexity and confusion. Additionally, Prometheus typically avoids getting involved in config management, and this feature seems to veer into that territory. Furthermore, labels are templatables, and it seems more intuitive to have them closer to the actual definition of the rules rather than separated in a group. It also raises the question, which we just had now, of which definition of the labels takes precedence when there's a conflict between the group and individual rule labels. I just read it because for the recording. The other one is another concern I have with adding labels to recording rules is that for the recording rules that don't need the extra label, any change on that label will change the metric. For example, if the label is used to route alerts to a certain team changes will also have an impact and change the generated time series inside the recording rules in addition to the alerts. This could have unintended consequences and may cause confusion, and metrics alerts on common labels change, e.g. if you use min over time over the role of such a changed rule. Even if labels are only applied to alerts, it still raises similar issues around confusion and templating, as well as questions about precedence in case of conflicting labels. Yeah, I guess it's all solvable, but yeah, I do think those are valid concerns. We just have to weigh them. And that was essentially where we were in the box crop.
The two thoughts which I had were A, we have had variations of the is this a footgun yes or no discussion previously. and we agreed that syntactic sugar at the cost of potentially introducing foot guns is defensible, like at least not a hard no as it used to be. The second immediate thought as a networking person, more specific wins. So if anything is in a specific rule that takes precedence over a grouped rule, because it's just more specific. So the principle of least repairs, basically. I don't have a super strong opinion on the feature itself. I just found those two things noteworthy in this context.
I think the config management argument is definitely to be considered. I mean, how many people actually maintain like their rule file as is instead of generated from some other specification where this could easily be added. Especially if we're talking about large sets of rules.
So the current labels stancer overrides labels from the rule evaluation. So maybe labels should override the group-wide setting, but the expression shouldn't override the group-wide labels. Was that confusing? So, I mean, we have this labels, like if you write a recording rule, you have expression, like you have record with name, then you have expression with expression, then labels to literally, I'm looking at the docs, labels to add or override before storing the result. So we already have this per rule labels stanza or whatever the proper word is. And this overrides labels that come from the expression directly. And if we say the group-wide thing is essentially syntactic sugar to put the same labels stanza on every single rule, then it should still override the labels from the expression.
And that is what is implemented.
Yeah. Gotham.
So I see three things. One is labels from expression, labels, additional labels in the rule, and then the group level labels.
Yeah.
So which is the ultimate winner if all three are there?
I mean, gut feeling right now is labels, like the label stancer is the ultimate winner, then the groups thing, and then the expression is the weakest one. I would maybe it would have been better in a different order, but now that we already have a labels thing that overrides the expression, it might be weird to have a group setting that is now suddenly lower than the label setting, right?
Agreed.
But then on the between group and label setting, we could run down this semantic of the more specific thing wins, right? I mean, this is also how the config works, right? If you have a global limit, it applies to every part of the config that doesn't have a local limit or stripe interval or whatever we have, right? So that would be consistent. All the labels from the expression is all like it's special. We could argue that. I mean, essentially, since we already have the labels thing, all the concerns that Julian brought up are also applying to the labels thing, right? So if you already have that, I don't see we are like breaching any more dams by adding the group setting.
So the feeling of the room is it's fine. So let's just try.
Okay. So let's, I guess consensus, not ready to write it down, but it would be, we're fine with the feature. The groups labels should, the labels should have precedence over the group labels, and both of them have precedence over expression labels. And Brian has already done the review, so he'll finish up the pull request with the author in case the author is still interested after a year. And then you're good to go.
Yeah, so it needs some work, which the author didn't do. So I guess we're assuming I do that.
He seems to be active on GitHub.
All right, let's ask.
Let's just ask.
Yeah, so let's ask first, and then others we'll do it ourselves.
We are okay merging the PR once it's updated, given the above discussion. And for the record, I added an order of precedence with rules label, group label, then expression label. Most specific at the beginning. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Hmm? Okay, we have a tie between two topics, but as Josh isn't here, let's go with the newer one first. Brian, shall we take experimental of TLS implementation in exporter toolkit?
Yeah, it's been in there a year or something like that. I personally doubt it's coming back out.
Does anyone feel like no?
The one thing that might make us delay doing that is that we said at another one of these meetings that we would move it from exporter toolkit to common, and I don't believe that's been done.
But then the question is more one of where should it live rather than if to take off the experimental flag.
No, we already agreed where it should live. If you search for TLS in this file, you'll find that. So I think today we could agree in principle that it's no longer experimental, but it seems like a mistake to declare it a good thing effectively in the wrong place.
You're right. I looked at the file, at the doc. So basically, the question is if we should remove the experimental and move it to common at the same time.
Yeah.
Anyone against it?
I'm not sure it makes sense to move it, but depends on what parts of it we move. The maybe moving the web package to common is a good idea. I've wanted to expand and make the exporter toolkit actually more of a toolkit than just the one web package that we use. I'm fine with either, but I just haven't looked at what parts are in the exporter overlap and what parts are for Prometheus.
So I think that was covered in the June meeting.
I must have missed that one.
Like I say, if you search for TLS in the Dev Summit Google Doc, you will find right after where it says Frederick leaves. It says factored out, enable common config changes.
But also for the intents and purposes of this group meeting, it seems we are fine with removing the experimental flag. And on the moving, I mean, there is consensus to move it to common, but also if Ben has strong arguments, maybe you can discuss this directly with Brian.
Yeah, we can chat about it. I don't have a specific objection. I just want to make sure that we aren't moving things around randomly. And so if we're gonna do this, we should plan the move so that we can get all the exporters updated.
So for the intent and purposes of this position, consensus, we are going to remove experimental from the TLS implementation. Yeah. Not perfect wording, but all agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Just trying to match votes with people in the call. I mean, we can try this query screenshots we can try query screenshots in notification in the alert manager, but we don't have Josh here. So if anyone cares and wants to carry the conversation, we can do this one, or I'm going to skip. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Then we don't have Daniel. I'm going to murder this. Rabovac in the call, secret providers.
So it's my colleague from my team, so I can lead that topic as well.
Good. Go ahead.
Cool. So there is a link document, Prometheus Remote Secrets, and it was kind of like started, I guess, announced on this Dev Summit list as an alert manager feature, but actually it's for Prometheus generally. Maybe I can quickly share my screen to explain it. Yeah, and just to explain, very quickly the motivation and the design is that currently we support generally in Alert Manager when maybe configuring secrets for integrations for the notifications, and for the Prometheus when we configure secrets maybe for service discovery, maybe for scrape target HTTP configuration. We have this kind of like password secret where we kind of like, we can put the string there if you are okay with security being affected here because you're in a plain text or a secret. We change them later on and recommend to use files. So this can be this certain secret can be read from the file system. However, in the kind of Kubernetes context and generally when people on scale use different secret providers, there might be a need to have a more kind of direct secret, let's say, management secret communication, right? So this proposal essentially proposes that we kind of like similar to service discovery, where we directly talk to Kubernetes, to Docker, to Amazon, AWS, whatever. Here we directly talk with supported secret providers. And for example, one very basic secret provider that we right now have to maintain Prometheus fork because of that is a Kubernetes, and I mean Google, where there is Kubernetes, secret provider, essentially Kubernetes secrets. And for example, here for a scrape target, for HTTP configuration of it to maybe enable TLS and get the TLS key not from the file system, but actually directly talk to Kubernetes API and fetch and watch a secret with a certain key. You can easily do that by extending Prometheus and extending configuration. And instead of a password, direct password or password file, you would have a password reference. And this can have different providers for example, Kubernetes, where you could specify where to talk to in terms of API, and maybe the where's the key of that particular and what the secret name and in what namespace. This can be further extended to maybe Vault, which is like very common secret provider, maybe other secret management software. I know, well, for example, like AWS have what it's called like AAM, and you can store secrets there. So I think there was like another person from the community from Amazon who wanted to add that to Alert Manager. So you can search the secret exactly in AWS KSM. They wanted to have a provider for that. So it sounds like two main motivations for this work is one coming from Google, where we want to literally read community secrets directly, and we want that for scalability. We essentially cannot longer go with the file system approach because we have so many Prometheuses running as a daemon set. It's just not scalable. And apparently, it's actually unsafe to use Kubernetes secrets and mount it into the container volume because it's kind of in your file system. It's much safer if this information is fetched into memory directly. That's a recommendation from the security team. Yeah, and then I know about this AWS Amazon motivation to integrate with Alert Manager better for Amazon users. So I wonder what's your feeling about that? Do you like generally this idea? Do you have any particular blockers, any particular feedback to this proposal?
You can also feel free to just unmute and talk if you want. But you can also write it.
The one thing that gives me pause is every time you add a new thing with a new client library, the binary gets bigger. So that's not really a problem for Kubernetes. Well, it is a problem, but it's one we're already paying for. But Vault is probably a good example that if you add, anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah, Ben, do you have something on top of that, or?
Yeah, I posted an analysis of which of the various service discovery libraries were consuming what amount of binary space, and yeah, there are some wild differences in how much additional bloat various libraries add to Prometheus itself. Kubernetes and like GCP and AWS are tens of megabytes of binary space versus some of the other service discovery implementations that are super tiny in turn, like kilobytes.
Yeah, I think just to sum up, we already had a discussion and we decided to essentially eat the problem and kind of like it's better to have bigger binary than to block community with service discovery implementations. But it is definitely a bigger and bigger problem. We already have a plugin system. So yeah, I wonder if it's a definitely problem to solve, but I wonder if this is blocking here. Especially to me, this is exactly the same discussion as adding another service discovery implementation. But yeah, fair. Definitely, we have to have that in mind. What others are thinking? I think Nicholas maybe first.
Yeah, I have two questions. Actually, one might be a suggestion over the problem about the binary getting bigger and bigger. But first, the question is maybe I can raise on the document, but in case of this secret service is facing some issues, some reliability is down, are we going to refreshing the secrets we already using or not? How do we are thinking about this resilience between the secrets we already load in memory and the sync between the external service?
Good question. I think we have to decide on semantics. Maybe Daniel already wrote it. I don't know. My instinct is that probably we should do the same as we did when we don't have invite configuration and we have a new invite configuration. We can just cache the old one. And sure, it will be wrong, but the best we have. And of course, with errors, with metrics, but don't fail like scrape. Yeah, but we can. I will make sure this will be answered in the doc. Thanks.
Cool.
Do you have any preferences?
No, actually not. And I will go over it on the document and think about it as well. And the other one is like regarding the binary getting older and older. Probably the idea that I can raise up right now, it's going to increase complexity a bit. But what I could suggest, like, and if we define like a common API where Prometheus will always ask for, and you can provide the address, and instead of we implementing again and again and again every new service, new secrets provider like Vault, AWS, Google, and another one we are going to have like, I don't know, DigitalOcean and so on. And if we define like, oh, this is our open API spec for secret discovery, you just need to provide a endpoint where this API is compliant, and we can ensure that's going to discover this one.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that will be a good discussion to have, because you can totally do that. We can have generic network API. However, the service discovery, for some reason, for service discovery and for Alt Manager, this was not enough. And I don't know, maybe because we already have a consistency of adding some other plugins, and other providers were kind of like inconsistently, oh, why we are not in. Maybe if we have this secret provider only as an API, no other implementation, that could work. Yeah, if the room feedback is to go in this direction, we can explore this.
Yeah, I'm saying that because like trying to be a bit fair, like with all the providers. Okay, we know that, for example, we are currently supporting the major ones on the service discovery, but like the major one at a certain moment in time, they might not be the biggest one right now, but and we have new solutions that became standards, and we are not accepting new ones too.
Yeah. So for me, we have a file already, which to me is some kind of like extension that anybody can build in. So that's sorted already. Now we are discussing, do we need more, or do we need like a pure network based, because we know file system is this kind of security problem. Yeah, it's a good question. Let's note it down. Any feedback on this particular, like, do we feel maybe a network API and that's done, or are we okay with maybe some providers supported built in?
Yeah, Ben raised something interesting. We already have the HTTP service discovery configs. It's like kind the same idea, if you, not exactly the same, but the same, almost the same concept. You provide you just need to reply me on a specific.
I'm only curious about what's the direction. Do we want to pursue this this proposal and add providers built in? Do we want to add a network API? Do we want to do nothing, or do we want to do all of it? So network and the providers.
On service discovery today, I might be wrong, but I have the impression that some providers are not built by default, but people can build Prometheus with the extra plugins. Was I dreaming, Ben?
We build all plugins by default. There's no plugins that we maintain in the code base that aren't built, and I think this is a really good thing, and I want to keep it that way. The reason to have removable plugins is for people who want to custom build their own embedded environments, but for Prometheus general use in our published binaries, everything on by default.
Okay, so there is the option to remove and not to add. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, the only advantage, there are two advantages that I see, like having this over network with a common API. It's like not maintaining this code on Prometheus side, especially because we already have like a big code base, and now so we just overload the implementation to the ones that like wants to integrate with Prometheus, Yeah,
there are there are other downsides of the network API. One downside is, for example, on top of like another component being needed in the system, which makes it like much more difficult to use. Another point is that the configuration will be very specific to this network API, but maybe we can provide like a nice experience for Kubernetes users to use Kubernetes discovery with Kubernetes secrets, and you can literally specify namespace, key, and name. So like you don't need any other kind of like knowledge to configure this. But anyway, those are good thoughts. I would love in this forum, if we can, have kind of the feeling, the direction or consensus. What do we want? Providers, network API, both, or nothing? So repeating the question again, anyone has preferences?
I would go with everything built in just for consistency with service discovery. But yeah, I'm not team member.
Sure. Anyone else has opinion?
The one question I have is, can we find a solution which makes the binary smaller?
Yeah, that's a separate discussion a little bit, because
I don't think it. I honestly don't think it's a separate discussion, because there are a few different types of cost to any change, like obviously code readability, maintainability, configuration surface, any breaking changes, confusion for the users, blah 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 blah, but also the resource usage. And if it makes Prometheus larger or use more RAM or use more storage, that's a cost which we cannot undo. So I would much rather invest time in thinking how to make it small and then embrace everything as much as we can, rather than make it big and then not make it small. Sorry, brains. I think it's better to optimize for size before something is merged, because this makes it easier to convince people that this is a priority. Once it's merged, no one cares.
Yeah, that sounds like try for both, right? For the clients that are already in the code base, might as well build the service discovery, but also have sort of an escape hatch that is more generic.
So I didn't get your preference, Jan. Can you?
You propose a mix of built-in secret providers, but also have something generic. And I think what Richie just said sounded like if we already pay the size, the binary size, like in the case of Kubernetes, it makes sense to build in, but makes also sense to think about something network-based that is generic for things that we might not want to add in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Like essentially to answer Richie's questions as well is like there are providers which are noob, which is a noob essentially, like there's literally no additional size. So so maybe we could have consensus that we add them right away if anybody wants to maintain and contribute them, but we could wait until we add more secret providers before we figure out, how important this binary issue is and how to solve it. However, this is inconsistent with our current service discovery discussion, because here we don't care about binary sizes. We used to don't care. So do we want to add the same logic here as well? I think so. It just maybe this issue wasn't surfaced yet of the binary size, right? Okay, maybe we could try the consensus around that, around like, hey, maybe secret providers are okay as long as they don't increase the binary size. So that's kind of maybe easy way to have consensus right now, which we all agree. But to go further, we could explore binary sizes options as well quickly. So first of all, what's the problem? Like, sure, our binary is big by default, which means big Docker container images. But that's it. What other disadvantages of that? It's not slower, it's not more RAM, it's just size of storage of the binary, right? Where you found this very
a network bills with image pooling.
Okay. Network to download.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with you about it. Like, it's bigger container, like we're going to consuming more network and more time, but usually people caches Docker layer, so it's not that much, you know, especially if we push the caching layer to the hashes.
Yeah, so definitely less of a problem. But for some reason, Ben, you were investigating this. I'm sure it was problematic for you.
It was more. I found so a service discovery proposal came in and it added like 30, 40 megabytes of additional code and to pull in one new SD, and like that's another 20% of the binary size, and it was just I don't, you know,
yeah.
Why is it so big, and why are we pulling in these giant libraries, and what are the I don't actually know what the other effects are. It could affect memory usage. I don't know. Like you know, memory usage is the biggest complaint, and more code can mean more memory mapping. Even if it's a bunch of random Go library code that's not actually touched, the compiler thinks it's necessary and it's going to get mapped into memory.
Yeah, but it will be evicted if not used, though. So, but yeah, so, but a little bit maybe overhead, sure. Yeah, but it sounds like in the room we didn't hear anybody like literally complaining about the size. It is just concerning to see unreasonable amount of code of our dependency, which is fair. So I wonder if this is the moment that we stop adding more, or proactively.
I think it's more we demand that the vendors handing us code hand us relatively efficient libraries, and we need to push our upstream vendors to provide us more efficient libraries, because you know the AWS or the Kubernetes SD code brings in 30 megabytes. When you remove all plugins, the Prometheus code itself is 50 megabytes, and so just the service discovery library being almost as big as the Prometheus code base is concerning to me in terms of all the complexities involved.
Yeah, I like that idea, at least to have some restrictions requirement. So maybe that's a consensus as well on this binary size, is that document that for the service discoveries and new ones, I guess, or ideally existing ones as well, is to, I don't know, restrictions of, 5 megabytes on only maximum, for example. Who knows? Maybe that's is very optimistic for some cases. Maybe it will actually schedule some work around that. Yeah. Richie.
I don't think a specific number makes sense, but I think that in particular all the sustainability and everything, I mean, this does have a point. Not having hard limits, but at least having a deliberate choice of how much do we gain for adopting how much stuff. Because this is weight which is basically going to be carried forward forevermore.
Yeah.
And we don't know what optionality we lose by doing this. This is where I'm coming from. So I don't think a hard limit of 5 megabytes or 10 or whatever. If it's really useful, it's 4.9. Sorry, if it's really useful and it's 4.5 5.1, sorry, I'm on painkillers, so my brain is shit. Or if it's not useful and it has 4.9, like then the number isn't the deciding factor, in my opinion.
Still, number would be useful because otherwise people are like, okay, what's big? What's big? What's big for you? And so I'm sure, definitely not hard limit. So if anybody has like 5 of the 0.9, we wouldn't stress. If somebody has 7 even, like maybe we wouldn't stress depending on the circumstances. So maybe soft limit is a better way to put it, like recommendation. Recommendation, ideally 0, 5 megabytes maximum. Really as easy as that. But anyway, this essentially unblocks maybe service providers and adding more service providers and adding maybe secret providers, right? Fully, like whatever, in the same kind of fashion as service discovery is handled. Maybe it would unblock the consensus around that, essentially. Should we try such consensus, maybe? Or anybody has objections, strong objections around having a soft limit and around binary sizes and allowing secret providers?
I think they're separate concerns. Let's just talk about allowing secret providers.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, so any thoughts around secret providers, assuming the binary size is fine, then
I'd love to see secret providers built in.
Yeah, good. Any other opinions? It is a maintenance. It is a complicated, a little bit more involved config, but it's more secure. Okay, I think we have room for consensus around 2 consensuses, like separate ones. Like for one, we could attempt for the soft limit or recommendation on the binary sizes, and another one separate for the secret provider built in. And our best consensus creator, Richie, helping us here. Good.
Consensus. We like the idea of integrating secret providers in general. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Going forward, consensus. Going forward, we intend to be more critical of additional code, binary size, RAM, or CPU usage when pulling in external dependencies for functionality. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? People seem less happy, but I'm seeing thumbs up.
Yeah, I wish we could be more specific, but this consensus unblocks that. We can work on details exactly in the documentation, for example. Yeah.
I mean, okay. So we have consensus, but let's actually talk about this for one thing we could do or could not do, and people working at companies who clearly have an interest in getting this thing in. might be able to help us here. I also see this a little bit of a internal proof to managers of, hey, we need to make this thing more lightweight. Maybe have a slimmed down integration version of this, and actually allow people to focus on a little bit of lightening or cleanup work. The question is, should we write this in here, or should we just ignore it and still have, like, we can write something in manager speak where this is an invitation to providers or to third parties to provide lightweight integrations, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know if this helps or hurts. So you tell us.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm just curious how we can promote this idea and maybe not enforce it, but again, recommend it. Is it like just documentation change? Is it like how to make sure other maintainers would check this and suggest this, right? Like how many maintainers are not on this call or will forget about that. So kind of like maybe I'm curious what we can do.
We don't have quorum in this call anyway, but also this is not an official decision-making body. Even lazy consensus in a PR can, in theory, go against us. It shouldn't, but it can. And Ben left. Okay, point of order. We are at 1 hour. We lengthened the calls again, so I'm more than happy to continue. But do people want a bio break of 5 minutes or whatever? Yes? Okay, so we continue, yes? Yes, and we have 5 minutes break. See you in a bit. Hello, everyone. Did I wake you up? So, we don't have a Bartek yet, so we can't fully close this topic. Does anyone want to make a really bad joke while we wait? You're not allowed to make a good one, only bad ones. Jan looks as if he wants to make a joke.
I don't have any bad ones.
Okay, try a good one.
No, you just said not to.
I changed the rules. Okay, we can also move on if there's no Bartek. I can poke him on Matrix.
I guess we can quickly go back to the subject when Bartek comes back.
I also poked him. Let's see. Win/F he comes back. So I also poked Josh. He told me he couldn't come. He's somewhere at the train station. So Ben left. We don't have Josh. We don't have Arthur and Bartek and Björn enforcing units and metric names.
Okay. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Arthur should do this. Why is Brian crying? Arthur,
Okay,
you should
sorry.
take this, right? You suffered most.
Yeah, I can pick it up. So there was one contributor who started working on adding units on Prometheus Common, Prometheus Client Golang, Prometheus, and based on the Open Metrics specification. Once she started to work on this, we noticed that the spec says that units must be enforced not only on the protobuf message that has a unit, but also on the metric family name. So if we have, I don't know, requests, HTTP requests, the unit is seconds. We are not only adding the unit, but we are also adding HTTP requests duration seconds to the name. It's forced. So we are wondering how safe this is to like how much of a breaking change this is to existing metrics. Fabian?
No, I can tell you what the Java client does. So we enforce that just to be compliant with the spec. And also because if you don't make the unit part of the metric name, you cannot figure out what unit you're looking at, which is hard. Like if you don't know, is it milliseconds or seconds? In terms of breaking, not very much breaking, because if people want to have an old metric name that doesn't have a unit, they can just omit the unit in the metadata, and then it's no problem.
Is there an example from a well-known program that? Yeah, just sort of struggling to think of a good case where there isn't a unit in the name.
Björn?
Okay, this was the button. I mean, what Fabian said, I think it's completely true, right? You can, in this kind of Prometheus only use case, it works. I'm more concerned about like the wider context where some people, I mean, in the old Prometheus tradition, we have the unit in the name, and that was always our argument why you don't need that extra unit field. It's in the name anyway, right? Now we add that field because people wanted it, whatever, in the open metrics discussion. But from the outsider perspective, you don't have this historical context. You might ask, why do you require it in the name if you have it in the metadata? That would be the obvious question. And I mean, that's first, it's just an academic question, but now we have this whole interaction with the open telemetry universe. And I'm afraid that in OTel, you don't have a similar requirement. So you will get a bunch of OTel metric names that don't contain the unit name because the unit is somewhere in the metadata. And now if we ingest into Prometheus, the obvious thing would be to just add that unit name. But then we are back at this old problem that the metric names in Prometheus aren't completely identical to the names in the OTel universe. And to make possible to have identical names, we're even including now, after a lot of controversy, this UTF-8 support for metric names. And if we require that metric names always contain the unit, yeah, we are also back at these weird discrepancies that are like tiny, but might be annoying.
So
Yeah.
I can also let you know how that open telemetry stuff works in Java, because we implemented now both the Prometheus Java client can expose open telemetry format, and the open telemetry SDK can also expose Prometheus format. So I know all the conversions by now, and it's actually true. So the open telemetry standard does not only say that the unit is optional, it says there must not be a unit as part of the name. So you must remove it. And so what we have in the Java client, the unit, like if the unit is there or not, depends on the exposition format. So internally, we have a name. If we expose in Prometheus text format or Prometheus protobuf format, we append the unit to the name. If we expose in open telemetry format, we do not append the unit. And the same thing, the other way around, is when we convert, open telemetry to Prometheus.
So I think the thing that should be on the table is shall we ignore open metrics in this area?
Yeah, or I mean the more radical approach would even be, if there's a unit in the metadata, then cut out the unit name on ingestion so to be compliant with open telemetry, right? I mean, we are now in this situation where there are no good solutions. You will always create confusion in one direction or the other. And if there were no, I mean, it's really weird that, so open telemetry really explicitly forbid, or is it like a recommendation you should not have the unit name in the metric name?
I think it's must not, but I need to look it up. Either should not or must not.
I mean, must would really mean we are non-compliant if we accidentally expose a metric that
I can look it up. Maybe I find it.
Yeah, please do.
Ooh.
Which,
Yeah,
I mean, but
so.
this would not be even possible if OpenTelemetry officially wants to be compliant with both Prometheus and OpenMetrics. But Fabian, please do.
I mean, I think as a conversion, you can do this, right? Just I'm coming from this kind of user experience where people jump back and forth between different tools, and they see some name of any kind in one of their tools, and then they want to search for exactly that name in the other tool. And of course, they don't expect that a seconds will suddenly disappear or appear in that name because it's just a name, right? They see it as an opaque string. And as said, just like replacing dots by underscores was already creating enough friction that we are now touching every part of the stack to include UTF-8 support. and that the unit thing seems to be even weirder. Anyway.
I found it. It should not. I will post the link in the doc.
So I think we can take these two questions separately. The question of how should we deal with the open metrics requirement and how shall we deal with the open telemetry requirement, because we know when we're receiving data from open telemetry, it comes in a totally different protocol. So I don't think it's mandatory. I mean, it might simplify things to have the same answer for both, but it sort of feels like there isn't the same answer for both. So I just want to say that that's two proposals, and this one got there first, and this one's about open metrics.
I mean, if you like receive OTLP and ingest it into Prometheus or Prometheus compatible backend, then you will probably not come up with the idea of including seconds in the metric name. But if then the Open Telemetry Collector exposes open metrics, it will insert that unit, right? And then depending on your essentially transport, how you get metrics from OTel into Prometheus, you get different metric names. That sounds also quite dodgy.
Yeah, no, I sympathize with what you're observing, but that sounds like a question for the authors of the collector, and potentially for the authors of these two specs.
Yeah, one suggestion that, like, I'm kicking Vesp of nests again, but we might consider open metrics 1.1 or 2.0 or whatever, like just picking up the long list of problems that we found out and start working on solving them, so it's easier to work with. And one suggestion would be to not have the unit on the metric family name, but only on metadata.
But I'm wondering, is there even an issue? I don't see an issue with having the unit part of the name in Prometheus and not in the OTLP transport format.
Yeah, but with the same argument, why is there an issue if dots are replaced by underscores, right? I mean, I think the issue is really if you literally just do a search for an opaque string, and if humans do it, you might even spot then what you did there. But if machines do this, it just becomes weird, right?
I mean, with the attribute name, it was still this argument that you can filter spans from distributed tracing by the same attribute that you filter your metric, and have these kind of workflows. And that, of course, only works if the attribute names in tracing are the same as the attribute names in metrics. But if you talk about metric names only, like without any navigation back and forth, I don't see much of an issue with having the unit.
Yeah, I mean, would be good to get some actual practical experience from that. How much of an issue that is.
Okay.
Sorry, it would have been much easier if that's really true, that the metric name isn't that big of a deal, to not allow UTF-8 characters, arbitrary UTF-8 characters in metric names. It would have been much easier if you just did it for label names. But anyway, like I think it's weird that a transport protocol requires you to touch the name, right? What's essentially an opaque string. The kind of underscore total thing is already going through this direction, but then you could say it's really because in the open metrics, like the help, right, the actual keyword that it's indexed on doesn't contain the underscore total, but that's not true with the unit, or is it? I mean, who knows open metric standard by heart? The underscore seconds would still appear in the help and type, right?
Yes, the unit is part of that. The total stuff not.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really feels a bit like really coming from this Prometheus background. It totally makes sense. But in that wider world where not everyone has this tradition, I think it will create a lot of confusion.
So I'm seeing two options. Like one is when we receive OTLP, on ingestion we add the unit to the metric name just to be compliant with OM, and the other is working on OM 1.0, 1.1 or 2.0. Like, which one do you think it's more feasible?
So, I mean, the conversion of OpenTelemetry to Prometheus is defined as part of the OpenTelemetry spec. And that currently says you have to append the unit when you convert to Prometheus. And that's not only implemented in our endpoint, that's implemented in the OpenTelemetry collector, that's implemented in SDKs for different programming languages and so forth. So if we want to change that, we should reach out to the OpenTelemetry community, change it in the spec, and then work with everyone to be compliant, because otherwise the name depends on your implementation, which would be the worst case.
Okay, so yeah, I guess we can have consensus on this. We add the metric name, the unit to the metric name.
And then we need to be really consistent if we ingest OTLP. I'm pretty sure in the current OTLP implementation we don't do that, but then we needed to add the unit name, and we need to cut it out if we send OTLP, right? I mean, that's not implemented yet, right?
But also, if you look at the spec, this unit thing is a beast. It's because what you have, like, unit in OpenTelemetry is not the same as unit in Prometheus. They don't have simple, I mean, first, there's this slight difference that they use this UCUM, or how it is called, and we use whatever, like the long names. So they use S and we use seconds. But they also sometimes have annotations in curly brackets that we then filter out. And they have stuff like whatever requests per second. And then they have this division operators in their unit, and then we convert it into a string like per second and stuff. So it's like this whole conversion of the short OpenTelemetry unit syntax into something that makes sense as an OpenTelemetry, as a Prometheus metric name is, yeah, it's not straightforward. And it's defined in the spec. There are multiple implementations in the Java SDK, for example, also in the OpenTelemetry collector, but it's not trivial. I mean, you know.
Also, like converting from Prometheus to OpenTelemetry in the case where you don't use explicit unit metadata, you are essentially starting to guess, is this part of the metric name a unit, and should I cut it out and put it into the unit?
We don't do that. It has to be explicit metadata, otherwise it will not be converted.
Wow, such a word coming just out of combining standards with each other.
And I think anyway, like independent of that, it's not nice, but I think consensus should be whatever we do, we comply with the OTL spec, because everything else will just, you know, be even more of a mess.
All right, I guess we are done.
I mean, yeah, the only consolation is essentially what Fabian said, that maybe the metric name, in contrast to labels, isn't that important as a direct match if you want to like jump from traces to metrics and stuff like that. So that's good enough for now to go along with it, but it doesn't feel good.
I'll write the consensus, but maybe someone can call it out because I'm not team member.
Can we just say we comply with the OpenTelemetry spec for Prometheus to OpenTelemetry naming conversions?
Do you mean
why would we say that
sending-
in the context of a proposal about open metrics?
Sorry,
I mean, I think Arthur's initial request was coming from he's coding open metric support into client Golang and needs to know right now if essentially switching on open metrics should enforce compliant metric names in the client Golang exposition, right? I mean, I guess you could just make it a config flag. Maybe we have something like this for.
Yeah, that's already the plan.
Yeah. So you could do both. You could recommend one. Sorry?
For the question asked, why does OTel come into it? I mean, sure, it's really useful to know and recall, keep in mind what OTel says, but for the question asked, I don't think it's got anything to do with OTel.
Agreed. It doesn't have to do with OTel, but it has to do with ingestion and somehow touches.
I mean, I think OTel came to the game because if the conclusion had been to be OTel compliant, we don't want any enforcement of metric names being part of unit, being part of the metric name, then we would also doubt if we should implement open metrics, this aspect of open metrics. But with all said, we have this conversion anyway already handled in OTel. So we could as well, at least there's the option of being compliant with open metrics without breaking anything towards open. Like we are not making things worse with regard to open telemetry.
Being closer to client Golang, I imagine someone creates a metric called HTTP request duration, but doesn't add seconds to the metric name. But it does add seconds to the unit. When we expose it, should we append the seconds to the suffix as a suffix of the metric name, or should we leave it empty?
I think it should be a configure, an option. Like, I don't know if we did similar things with the underscore total already, right? I ran into this even back then when I was still maintaining that you run into this and you don't know what's, like, the only bad options. You either break the users in a weird way or you're not open metrics compliant, and then probably it means you need an option for that and users have to decide themselves. But then how do you, like, the library users might not propagate this option to the users of the binary. And yeah, I mean, in Java, we have, I mean, I think the created thing, right, Fabian? In Java, this is just a setting in the properties. If you create _create a line or not, right?
In the newest release, the 1.x release, I think it's no longer configurable. You always get the unit.
No, the _created line.
Oh, the created, yeah. That's even disabled by default.
But you can switch it on via. You can switch it on, yeah. Right? So that's in Java. It's because you have this unified way of doing this. Like then, all Java binaries can be configured in that way, and that just doesn't exist in Go. Unless you go for environment variables, right? Where you could give everyone the option of configuring their Go binary to do X or Y, right? And maybe we should do it via environment variables, but so far it's just an option, like you would have options you pass into it. You need to configure it as the user of the library, which is not the user of the binary that uses the library. And then you're relying on the developers using the library to give this option to their users. And if they don't, then you're back in this, yeah, does my binary expose _created lines, or does my binary modify metric name? I mean, that's probably not such a big deal because the writer of the binary decides what the metric names are.
So trying to unwrap a few things from the written as spec point of view, it's relatively simple. If one thing says must do and one thing says should not, the intersection is to do it. But this is not just to discuss like in Absent and in Ivory Tower. The current behavior within Prometheus land is to have it. and the current behavior of the Python client libraries is to edit if it's missing. So on the assumption that client Golang is going to stay within the Prometheus ecosystem and then have an option to do OpenTelemetry at some point, similar to Java, I would much rather stay near to Prometheus rather than go away from Prometheus. But also, to be clear, anything in OpenMetrics can just be changed. So it's not hammered into stone and cannot be changed forevermore. It's more an argument in favor of consistency within the existing working ecosystem, less one of being precise just for being precise's sake, when we could change what being precise means.
Another thought is, like, currently we don't yet have the metadata unit support in client Golang, do we?
No, I don't think so.
So we could essentially offer as a new feature that you can set a unit metadata thing. And if you do so, the metric name must already comply. Otherwise, it's just an error in instrumentation. And if people want to keep their metric name and they just don't want to comply, they just don't set the unit metadata, as Fabian said, right? Well, he said it's not that bad breaking. Arguably, it's not breaking at all, because all the existing client Golang users, they don't set a unit. And as long as you don't set a unit, you can name your metric whatever you want.
Yeah, I think this is extra work on the user end that's not needed. Like setting a unit and making sure that the name is in the suffix. I would prefer to have an opt-in to have this appended or not have it at all. And we do the client Golang does the appending for the user.
Yeah, but then it's like this confusing effect that you name your metric X and what comes out of it is X_seconds. I mean, we so far we just do it by convention, right? I mean, every proper Prometheus metric has a unit in it. We might even lint it, right? So it's not that most users aren't already.
Did I drop or did Björn drop?
I'm still here and I can still hear you, but maybe people can't hear me.
Okay, let me rephrase. I couldn't hear the end of what Björn said. I just heard bang.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, can you just repeat, please?
The thing was that most users already set the unit in the metric name because that's the recommended way. And I don't know if the PromLint or whatever catches that, but users are already doing this kind of work, right? So it might feel weird that you set it in the name and then you also set it in the metadata, but it's also less confusing. Not sure. What is Java doing? Like, you are adding the unit, right? If it's not in the name, we should just do what Java is doing.
Yeah,
because this is also avoiding confusion if you have consistency between client libraries.
Yes, we are adding it. If it's
okay,
not there.
then let's, and Python is also doing it. Then just add it. But
Python is adding
it's not strictly breaking because the current users don't set unit in the metadata. So it's not breaking the users of client Golang.
Okay, I wrote it down in consensus, but I think I'm not allowed to call it.
I also think now maybe the room has a different opinion, right? Because you start, we are not appending unit as metric name suffix, but allowing opt-in. I mean, after all what we discussed right now in the last 5 minutes, I would say we're just doing what the Java client is doing. So if
Java client is by default, there's not an opt-in option.
I mean, the opt-in is essentially if you provide the unit metadata, you will automatically opt into enforcing your metric name. So it will always be off-metrics compliant. And but it's not really breaking to the current state, because current state is you don't provide a unit metadata entry.
I think I caught it, but also Arthur, if you want to read out the consensus, go ahead.
Maybe we should put into the consensus that the current state in Klein Golang is that you cannot provide a unit as metadata, and in that case, the behavior will stay the same. I mean, this could probably be worded more concisely.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I have an idea. Should I type?
Yeah, please.
I mean, ensures is if need be by modify metric name.
All right. So consensus is we are following what Python and Java client libraries do. If the unit metadata is set, the library ensures that the unit is part of the metric name. If need be, by modifying the metric name. Agree? Disagree?
For better or worse, I agree.
I changed it minimally. Sorry. So if you could read it out again, but I think this is consensus able.
Should I read it again?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, okay.
We are following what Python and Java client libraries do. If the unit metadata is set, the library ensures that the unit is part of the metric name, if need be, by appending it to the metric name.
Which has some, yeah, some non-obvious, what's the word?
Implications?
Indications, yeah, or there's this nice mathematical thing. Anyway, like
Yeah,
if you have underscore total, that's in a pure metrics world, it's not part of the metric name. But if we have this, you want to just switch Klein Golang to expose open metric or traditional format, then you would allow the user to set a metric name that explicitly includes underscore total, and that would then go after, like you would for the user, it would look like it's an infix. But I mean, it's implied. I think the consensus is fine. We should just be aware that appending is defined as appending before the other suffixes.
Should we be explicit about name conflicts? So if you register the same metric twice, but once with seconds, once with milliseconds, so based on the name, it should be possible, but at least you couldn't convert it to OpenTelemetry.
So if the name conflicts, we are providing an error. Or we do not append.
I don't know if that's
what does Python and Java do?
Maybe it's an implementation detail. I mean, I think that's a general thing where we have gaps in Prometheus. So the client libraries prevent name conflicts, but I don't think they cover all corner cases. But we don't need to cover this here.
I think so too, yeah. I think you can probably construct a lot of corner cases where you cannot convert OTel to Prometheus or vice versa because of those things, right? Like if OTel uses underscore total somewhere in a normal metric name, and I mean, we already have this, that even the classic Prometheus format allows what we even have in the standard Go metrics, right? The underscore total for a counter and the same name without the total for a gauge. And that's still not solved how we should do this there's, again, no good solution how we should do this. if we wanted to be fully open metrics compliant with client Golang. But that could also, I think there are many of those, as you say. I think we don't have to solve this now.
Okay, so the consensus there, we have it, right?
Yeah.
So in client Golang, do we append, generate stuff, or do we validate? Or it's choice of the client Golang maintainers?
It's validated, and if it's missing, it's appended.
Yeah, but this will only happen if people actually set a unit, which current code isn't doing. That's why it's not breaking.
But it's inconsistent with everything we did. So in similar fashion, if you create counter, we should add total for you, or like it's just maybe we should. I mean, anyway, I can disagree, but you can follow with consensus. I don't think we should append and generate. We are going to the state where you could kind of on the code level, you can, without runtime, figure out the metric name. And I would love to go in this direction. And if you're new that.
What I would love is we actually get rid of all magic suffixes, right?
Exactly.
I think we have this problem because we have magic suffixes. And somebody decided that open metrics should even double down on that instead of getting rid of it. But we are stuck with that, right? So I would, it's easy to argue this leads to weird results, but if we try to work around it, I don't think the real solution would be to not have magic suffixes, right?
Yeah, but also like this is fine on the protocol level, but I think we're discussing about how users will interact with client instrumentation. And I don't think appending or ensuring there is an unit and total and all those suffixes, this is not the same as how users would create the metric. In client Golang, we can provide two APIs, one that generates stuff for you and one that you are in control of your metric name. So my point is, in consensus, I don't think it makes sense to put if need to be appending to the metric name, because if client instrumentation chooses to allow users manually do this or generate, that's the client instrumentation decision, maybe.
So while you were not here, part of the discussion was to mimic what Python and Java are already doing, because otherwise it's also breaking. And I would also argue that it is breaking within Prometheus to take the unit away from the metric name. Because for better or for worse, in my opinion, probably better, not worse, we have this existing convention of encoding the unit name into the metric name. And for me, this is a switch over with 3.0 at the earliest kind of thing, not a change how the newer libraries behave on the fly kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. I think we have agreement and consensus on that on protocol, on when scraped, if you have a unit, we want to follow other libraries like Python and Java. We want to make sure the unit is in the metric name. I assume this is the truth. It's rather how we get there, how we allow users to instrument that in and stuff like that. So I'm happy for all instrumentations to enforce this if possible, to in whatever way they fit. Right? Is it generating? Is it erroring out and asking user to manually change that in code? Right? Maybe we're like discussing like technical specific implementation here.
I mean, we had a similar discussion with _total, right? Because you would, if you essentially switch on open metrics on an existing binary instrumented with client Golang, you would suddenly append magically _total to counters that haven't done this before, not following the recommendation. And that is a truly breaking change because those counters exist, right? And I think the situation here is a bit different because if you just switch, if you flip the switch, nothing will happen with regards to unit because existing client Golang doesn't even support unit metadata. So no manipulation of the matching name will happen. And from that perspective, I think it's fine, quote unquote, to do it in client Golang, given that Python and Java are already doing it. While for the total thing, I think our conclusion was it needs a config option so that whoever is doing this, like, you essentially have to opt into enforcing appending underscore total. Although then you would not be open-matrix compliant, but we had this dilemma that you couldn't do anything that wouldn't break at some point, right? But with the unit, we strictly speaking don't break anyone.
Sure.
If you set the unit, and then the behavior must be documented, of course. But I argued, I think you were gone, right? I argued it's confusing to just add this thing, but since client Java and client Python are only doing it, it's also confusing to not do it because people might be used to it from Python or Java. So I would tend towards like auto magically add it because it only happens when you set the unit. So it's kind of opt-in. We can document it at the method that adds the unit metadata that this will also modify the metric name if you haven't done it on your own already. Yeah, not a happy ending, but I think it's the least bad.
Yeah, I think still there is a way to kind of like maybe have another API for that, another method. Like anyway, but we can discuss this as a client Golang. We know the drill. Like, yeah, it has to be enforced one way or another. So I think those are separate discussions to have.
Okay, so you would not consent to the consensus, which is following what Python and Java client likes.
No, I don't feel blocked. Like, sure. I would remove this suffix. Like, I think it's up to the client instrumentation, but if you insist,
we can agree on not having consensus, and we can discuss later. Like, if you're
on the majority part, we have consensus, so it's worth taking it on that part at least. But yeah, it's up to you.
There is, maybe we can write that down, that when we started this discussion, we had on the table that we might want to get rid of this enforcement in open metrics. And I think we are not trying to get this done, at least not right now, right? Because it's already encoded in OTel and in various instrumentation libraries. We don't want to change that right now. That could be a future thing.
Yeah.
We'll consider then, but not now. So maybe you should write that down for now, because that's something we agree on. So consensus would be, yes, we want to enforce this one way or the other. And second, we are not immediately going for changing open metrics to not enforce the unit as part of the metric name.
Could you write this down?
I can try. Okay, so let's write this other consensus. And it's already green. Oh no, nothing is green here. Let's ungreen it. And now why does it change indentation? I don't know. Okay. Okay, how about that?
Does it then make sense to just merge both into one? super long consensus, because they seem to be directly related, not two distinct ones.
No. I mean, Bartek was unhappy with consenting now on appending the metric name if it's not there.
But he was also explicit about not wanting to block it. So from the consensus perspective, it's. But I don't have super strong feelings either way. I mean, we're basically done with this call anyway, so we can also spend in. Yeah.
I just thought that it sounded like we have no consensus at all, unless Bartek says he kind of disagrees but commits. But we do have a consensus about not changing open metrics right now and enforcing this requirement in client Golang as well. And this is why I thought, let's write that down. And there's not like this answers the main part, and we don't really have to. I don't think we have to enforce something in client Golang. I mean, the client Golang developers are here. They know the discussion, and then they can make an informed decision. I don't think we have to decide for them now about this kind of implementation detail, how to handle this. Okay, client Golang maintainers seem to be happy.
Okay, but we need to read it out. Consensus for, or Arthur, do you want to?
The first one, right?
Yes.
For now, we have no intention to change open metrics requirement of the unit being part of the metric name. Client Golang will enforce this requirement when exposing open metrics.
Yeah, there's an S missing. Yeah.
Agreed. Anyone disagreeing?
Okay, and then I would propose to just drop the other consensus.
Okay.
That took a lot longer than I expected.
But we got it done.
My bad. Sorry.
Should have come back earlier. Anyway, we have 7 minutes left. I don't think we will get anything done within the next 7 minutes. So unless Jan wants to tell us a few bad jokes, we can probably just call it a day early.
No, I'll be the bad guy. Let's call it early.
Yeah, I think everything else needs more than 7 minutes. And we also had a lot of people that dropped off already. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye-bye.